Hi, Simon Chiselian here. We're going to do another Lockdown Chronicles, something a bit different today. I wanted to talk about drugs. I alluded to that in the video yesterday when we were talking about the police. And drugs is obviously a massive thing within our culture, and it's been a very destructive influence, and it's been used by a number of different entities as their agenda for to create problems and to also create some degree of power over us. And we've all heard on the war on drugs, which sounds all very noble and all very just, but at the end of the day it hasn't worked, and it's actually eroded some of our freedoms. It's actually created more problems on the streets. It's created more problems socially as well. So let's have a look at the whole element of drugs. I mean, who decides that a drug is illegal? After all, like for instance marijuana, it grows, it's a plant, so God obviously wanted to have it. That's the way I suppose I look at it. And just as a caveat as well, I just need as a disclaimer, if you like, I have never ever done drugs ever in my life. I haven't taken any drugs and never smoked anything. So I'm not an expert in regards to the effects of drugs. I've seen the effect of drugs, but I've never had that myself. I think I'm probably too much of a control freak to do that. But anyway, that's just the way of it. But drugs have been used for centuries. They've been used medicinally. They've been used as hallucinogens. The ancient shamans used to use them for journeying to other realms. So it's actually within our culture all the way through. Someone somewhere just decided that it was illegal. So when you consider other type of substances that create an altered state, for instance, tobacco or alcohol, one can consider that they do actually far much more damage. I don't know anyone that's ever died through marijuana, but I know people that died through alcohol, sepsis of the liver and cirrhosis and things like this. I've known people that die from lung cancer with cigarettes, and the only real difference is taxes. Okay, so the government have worked out that they can tax alcohol, they can tax tobacco, and that's been done for centuries. And yet drugs, it just seems to be something that they haven't quite got a handle on how to tax it yet, how to extract value from that. And I'm sure once they do, then everything will be legalized, everything will be taxed, everything will be tabulated, and that will be that. So there's a number of things that can be abused, and so I don't think that anyone buys the fact that this war on drugs is for our safety, is to actually help us as a populace. I really don't feel that is the case at all. In fact, drugs have always been used as a currency as well. When I was in the military, during the Bosnian War, all of currency ran out really, really quickly, and it went over to American dollars within, I think it was 3 days. And then the American currency ran out, and everything then devolved down to precious gems, gold, silver, sex, and drugs. No rock and roll, unfortunately. But they actually used the drugs. In fact, it was the French Postal Service, French Military Postal Service, became one of the largest drug-running organizations in the world by bringing in cocaine by the bucket load, and actually in small packets that was actually used as the form of currency for a long time in Sarajevo. So the powers that be understand what drugs can actually do, and because it is addictive, you've actually got this constant stream of production, the constant stream of demand as well. What they haven't got is how to actually monetize it yet, to actually make it legal. But it does create a massive depopulation option as well, and a destabilization of that option. We're looking at the opioid crisis at the moment. Everyone's worried about a pandemic which is killing less than 0.1% of the populace, and yet opioids are responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths in them, certainly in America every year. No one seems to be too worried about that. So I feel that something needs to be done, but because the legal system has always gone for the lowest hanging fruit, Okay, it doesn't go for the major politicians or the people that are in business that are actually making all the money on this, because they're too hard. They've got good lawyers, they've got shell companies. It's too hard a target to go after. And of course, part of them, you could actually say that they probably own the judges as well, so you're not going to get a conviction. And this is why you have to go downhill. You have to go to the lowest hanging fruit to be able to get convictions, to try and show to the people that you're actually doing something about the problem, when in reality you're not having any real effect on it whatsoever. I wonder how many people are actually incarcerated in our jail cells, for possession of marijuana. I mean, I heard one guy, I was getting like 30 years, been incarcerated for 30 years for just having a drug on him that is actually now legal in 37 states. So it does become a bit of a mockery. So my ideas then, for what it's worth, if I was looking to try and destroy the problem of drugs, and given that we're dealing with an addiction, which is a disease, which is a medical condition, not necessarily a legal condition. So we are going to have people that are addicted that will need medical intervention. That's a fact of life, but they don't need to be in prison for that. So most of them have gone through this, what they call a gateway drug. I mean, I don't really believe that is the case. You either have an addictive personality or you don't. And addiction is down to whether you actually have connection with family, with friends, with community. When you lose connection, you get addiction. And that's what I have observed through all of my years in doing this. So you've got to destroy the connection, the negative connection to the addiction, and at the same time produce a connection to community to allow people to get the help that they require. So that's the basis of what my idea is. So instead of incarcerating people for possession, what you do is that you make possession of the drugs legal. And you have to then qualify that and quantify of how much of a drug you can use. And I think people have really started to see this now, calling it drugs for personal use, recreational use, that type of thing. Okay? So there is already understanding and a little bit of support behind that. So what you do, you remember these people are addictive, so you want to get the dealers off the streets. Because guess what? The dealers aren't the ones that are taking it. They're not the ones that are actually having the problems. They're just creating the problems for society. Therefore, the dealers need to be taken out. So you use the power of the addiction of the person and the greed and the desperation because they need another fix. And what you do is you offer a small reward for the low-level dealers. So what will happen then, in order for the person to continue his addiction, he will then dob in one of the dealers, not his own dealer, but one of the dealers, and get them taken off of the streets. He gets money for that, the greed is established, the addiction can continue, dealers off the streets. So you continue to do that. You continue to take the smaller dealers off the streets by utilizing that ability to be addicted. Now, it's what we call the law of diminishing returns at that point, because then there's less and less dealers actually fronting up to the person on the streets. Therefore, you're going to have a problem with supply and demand. So you're disrupting the supply and demand. Now, what you can do as part and parcel of giving the reward is that needs to be stipulated, is that you have to find help with that as well. So you take the reward, but they put you in a program. Okay, so now we can actually start to utilize that in order to be able to get people away from the addiction, which is the problem in the first place. Now, what you're going to be left with then is a distribution chain, which is going to have less and less people that are actually going to be requiring that product, and you're going to have a glut at the higher levels of the people that are actually bringing in the drug wholesale, if you like, not the retailers. So now we're going to the wholesalers. So these are much more difficult people to get because they're organized. It's organized crime, that's what they do. So then you increase the reward. Okay, so now the people that you've already put in jail, which are your lower level people, you then give them an incentive either to get their sentences down or to give them money to get a better life, so that they now start informing on the higher people. Remember, you're not going to get, the head of the mafia or the head of the cartels. That's never going to happen, unfortunately, because they're protected. They have top cover from politicians who run the judiciary. That is never going to happen. So that is what I feel that could actually start to disrupt the supply and demand system within the actual drug community. And therefore, you're going to have more people then in a program getting the help that they require and not being incarcerated through not really any real fault of their own. But the people that are actually making the money on this, they should actually suffer those consequences. And you then utilize the power of people, when they are going to be in the process of incarceration. They'll do anything they will to stay out of prison. Especially if you make it 10 years without parole. That's it, mandatory sentence. No one wants to give up a decade of their life. Most of us have only got 8 decades. We don't usually remember the first one, and most of us are not going to remember the last one. So we've actually got very, very few years to actually enjoy life. So I think this will be a tremendous incentive to be able to do that. We don't need to have high expectations here. The people that have created and carved out these empires, they will continue to do so. But if it becomes not profitable, they will put that money and that effort and that time into something else. They've already decided that they can do good stuff. Pablo Escobar, I'm sure that he would actually have made a good businessman in whatever field of endeavor that he chose to be, not necessarily in drugs. So you've either got it or you haven't got it. You've either got the charisma and the business acumen to make a business, or you haven't, and that's just a fact of life. So I'd rather hope that they will then put their efforts into something, more profitable. Perhaps what if they use that profits that they've got to create rehab centers, sponsor rehab centers and make profit from the government, who are now putting former addicts into programs to get them clean. Wouldn't that be an irony? So I think we just need to think outside the box. We need to be a little bit more creative with the way that we do things, and not just throw up our hands and say, well, we can't do anything, or it's someone else's problem. But the more we continue on with this war on drugs and funding DEAs and drug squads and all this type of thing, it's just going to put more and more division within the community. And right now we need more community, common unity. That's what the actual word means. We need that unity of common purpose. And once we can do that, we're then doing something good for the world. This is Simon Trezelyan. That's me for today. Trezelyan, out to you.